Hello everyone, good morning. How are you today? I hope everything's okay. Let me introduce myself. My name is Melani Hasibuan. I'm from class 3.1 English Education Department, University of Lancang Kuning. Welcome to our presentation. So let's get started. We will share material about variation of the language. Before we start, I will introduce my group friend, that is Esra Sihombing. The goals of this presentation are to make you understand about variations of variations, horizontal definition of dialect, vertical definition of dialect, and the nature of variation. So, let's start. I will share material about variations of variations and horizontal definition of dialect. Number 1, variations of variations. I shall be dealing with variation in speech between regions. Social variations are the subject of the next chapter. If you do not recognize a color, you may at least be able to guess which part of the country he comes from. The extent of our ability to do so clearly depends on how acquainted we are with the speech variety conquered. The fact that we can at least to some extent that tell where a person grew up on the basis of his speech suggests that the characteristics of an individual's speech, while ultimately unique, are in large part common to those who grew up in the same region, where there is a systematic sense of features, phonological, lexical, and so on, that is shared by a subgroup of those who speak a language but not by others. We can refer to speech of that group as a dialect. If some features are shared by several but not all the dialects of a language, we can perhaps distinguish of regional standard, C, and figures 8.2. Any given individual who grew up at C, some point on the spatial continuum AB, has a unique variety of speech which in principle belongs to a particular dialect, which in turn belongs to a particular regional standard, which in turn belongs to a particular language. 2. Horizontal definition of dialect. We generally experience a dialect continuum rather than distinct thresholds. One could travel from Lille to Lisbon, that is, from a city in which French is spoken to a city in which Portuguese is spoken, and find little abrupt change in local speech as one passes through the areas of such varieties as Occitan, Catalan, Castilian, and Galician. Recognizing the elusive nature of dialect boundaries, dialectologists often identify vocal areas and refer to the areas in which features change their from as transitional areas. To quote W. N. Francis, dialect boundaries are usually elusive to the point of non-existence. Francis 98 3p.1. Some linguists would argue that the concept of a dialect is so elusive as to be useless. If, however, one chooses to persist in the attempt to distinguish dialects, one has then to be prepared for a bewildering array of boundaries, of isoglasses, lines which delimit the area in which a particular feature dominates. Dialect areas generally surround a center of cultural and/or political influence. The boundaries between them may be sharpened by obstacles to communication, such as a range of mountains or a political boundary. It has been suggested that the boundary that meets the east coast of England at the was the Seattle, where it because there the pull between the population mass, the north, and the population mass of the south are equals a state of equilibrium having been attained. So, the definition of horizontal dialect is determining where spatially one dialect ends and another begins.
I'm Esra Sihombing. Okay, I will explain about definition of vertical dialect and the nature of variation. Number 1, definition of vertical dialect. Definition of vertical dialect is positioning the pronunciation of word and knowing the difference in pronunciation. Vertical defines the dialect spoken by someone in Bolton or someone in Brighton, but can softly say they speak a different dialect. On a higher level, we can say that they both speak a dialect of standard British English. We have to recognize the intermediate level and say that someone from Bolton and someone from Brighton speak the regional standard dialect of Northern English and the regional standard dialect of Southern English. English and America speaking varieties that belong to different regional standards, but they speak the same language. England and Holland don't. Said, imposing categories on actual cultural themes is less clearly different and there is room for debate about any categories and arguably dialect difference. When discussing the relationship between language and thought, Hudson suggests that the reason why we assume that dialects and language are different may be because modern English has different names for them, that there are some substantial differences between dialect and language. And consider how one can determine whether two types of language are dialect of one language or whether they belong to different languages. Almost everyone will agree that most Briton and most Americans speak the same language, English, and the Briton and Dutch speak different languages. This distinction has a number of drawbacks, but it is that people living near the edge of a language area can understand people in a neighboring language area better than they can understand people living on the other side of their own language area. Number 2. The nature of variation. The nature of variation is the variety that is considered a language. The variety that is considered a dialect can be different in terms of pronunciation, syntax, lexics, and so on. Looking at example of difference in English pronunciation, it can be said that in the West Midlands, the word long is pronounced with G, E. Native of Birmingham pronounce the city names S and B, me, G, but basically the more varied. Vowels are what give the regional pronunciation it is distinctive. It has been said that the pronunciation of vowels on the letters can indicate the the speaker is from the West Midlands or somewhere further north. Glaswegian resident said he had raised his hand. A variety of such pronunciation is Asian. The word pen sounds like the word pin and refers to the multiplication of syllables, so that, for example, the word glass sound to use it is transcription, such as gas.
Conclusion: everyone has a unique variety of speech, his ideologue, but a lot millions of such people speak similarly enough that they considered speaking the same language. Between these extremes, we can propose more or less local dialects and regional standards. It is difficult to define a dialect, as different features will change more or less suddenly in different areas, and it may also be difficult to determine whether the two speech varieties are dialects of the same language or belong to different languages. Differences are usually based on mutual clarity, but this can only be a guide. That's the presentation of our group. I'm sorry if there are mistakes, and thank you very much for your nice attention. I'm Melani Hasibuan. Good morning and see you.